Every morning in a quiet northern town, a German shepherd leads the wife of a former Navy SEAL to the same bus stop. Every afternoon, the dog waits there for her because she always keeps a simple promise: "I'll be home before dark." Then one morning, the German shepherd blocked the bus door and won't let her leave. And that day, the bus returns, but the familiar woman is no longer there. Day after day, the dog continues to wait, while the grieving husband tries to avoid every place that still holds memories of her. Why didn't that woman come back? And how long would the German shepherd keep waiting there? Follow this story to the end, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next journeys of loyalty and healing. By 7 o'clock on a February morning, Silver Pine had turned almost painfully bright. Snow from the night before lay clean across porch rails, parked cars, and low stone walls. The plows had already opened 2 dark lanes through Birch Street, and sunlight flashed off the frozen banks. Inside the Halston house, Wade Halston stood at the kitchen counter making coffee the same way he had made it for years. 1 scoop more than Laura thought necessary. No sugar in his, a little cream in hers. At 43, Wade still carried habits from his years as a Navy SEAL, waking before the alarm, noticing doors that did not close cleanly, and preferring to fix a problem rather than discuss one. His wife, Laura, had spent 17 years teaching him that not every problem needed fixing. That morning, however, Wade noticed one before she did. Ridge would not leave her alone. The 6-year-old German shepherd followed Laura from the hallway into the kitchen, his black and dark gold coat brushing the edge of the table. His left ear, which tilted slightly outward when he relaxed, was standing almost as straight as the right. He sniffed Laura's hand when she reached for her coffee, then followed her again when she crossed the room looking for a missing glove. Laura stopped beside the coat rack. "Ridge, what has gotten into you?" The dog did not wag. He pressed his nose into her palm and stayed there. Wade set down the coffee pot. "You all right?" Laura glanced over. "I'm missing a glove. Apparently that's now a medical emergency. You touched your head twice." That made her pause. For a second, Laura looked less amused. Then she rubbed her temple again and shrugged. "Headache, that's all." Wade studied her. Laura Halston was 41, with chestnut brown hair and faint freckles across her nose. She was dressed for the Silver Pine Community Library in charcoal trousers, a navy sweater, and her deep teal winter coat. Her cream scarf rested over a chair. She looked tired. Not ill, not frightened, just tired. "I can drive you," Wade said. Laura found her glove beneath a stack of mail. And deny Ridge his morning constitutional? "I was thinking more about denying you the chance to slip on ice." Laura pulled on the glove. 3 blocks, Wade. 3 icy blocks. She gave him the look she had used for years whenever his protective instincts crossed into unnecessary supervision. "The cold air will clear my head." Ridge stepped between Laura and the front door. That stopped both of them. Wade watched the dog carefully. Ridge was not growling. His body was not stiff with aggression. He simply stood sideways in the narrow space, looking up at Laura as if the ordinary rules of the morning had suddenly become negotiable. Laura bent and rubbed the fur behind his ears. "You too?" Ridge leaned into her hand. Wade almost told her again that he would drive. Almost. Instead, he picked up his own coat. "I'm walking with you," Laura smiled. Victory through compromise. It was one of the things Wade loved about her. She could make surrender sound like a tactical success. Ridge had been Laura's dog from the first minute, although Wade had been the one who brought him home. 3 years earlier, Laura had spent nearly an entire winter mentioning, with increasing lack of subtlety, that their house was too quiet. At first she mentioned it whenever they passed people walking dogs around Lake Rowan. By January, she had become specific. "This house needs somebody who runs to the door when one of us comes home." "I run to the door," Wade had said. Laura had looked over the top of her book. "You approach the door with controlled purpose." He had refused to laugh. She had laughed enough for both of them. On their anniversary that spring, Wade drove home with a young German shepherd sitting stiffly in the back seat of his truck. Ridge had been all oversized paws, alert amber eyes, and ears that seemed too large for his head. The rescue coordinator had told Wade the dog was intelligent, cautious with strangers, and happiest when given structure. Wade understood structure. He had assumed that would give the two of them common ground. Then Laura came out onto the porch. She stared through the open truck door, one hand covering her mouth. Ridge looked at Wade, then at Laura. Laura crouched without calling him. The dog stepped down, approached slowly, sniffed her fingers, and placed his head against her knee as if the choice had already been made somewhere. Wade had not been consulted. Wade folded his arms. "I paid the adoption fee, and he picked you." Laura buried both hands in the dog's neck. "Maybe he has good judgment." That joke had lasted 3 years. So had the choice. Ridge learned Laura's movements the way other dogs learned commands. The zipper of her teal coat meant work. The old gray cardigan meant the porch. He also learned the invisible line at the kitchen doorway and kept his paws behind it while Laura cooked. One rainy Saturday, Laura had spent most of the afternoon upset because Mr. Ellis, an 84-year-old library patron who came every Tuesday for Western novels, was moving south to live with his daughter. She had said little about it. Ridge had walked over, placed his head on her thigh, and remained there until she began scratching behind his ear. Wade had watched from across the room. "You know he only does that because you feed him." Laura had kept her eyes on Ridge. "No, he does it because he notices." The answer stayed with Wade longer than he ever admitted. Ridge noticed many things. He also became Laura's preferred method of retrieving a husband who lost track of time. If Wade stayed too long in the garage, Laura would point toward the back door. "Go get him." Ridge would trot across the snow or summer grass, stop inside the garage, and stare. Wade usually ignored him for 30 seconds. Ridge would turn toward the house, then look back. "Don't start." Ridge would take 2 steps toward the door. Wade would sigh, set down his wrench, and follow. By the second year, Laura no longer had to give the command. Ridge simply learned when dinner happened. That was how Ridge drew Wade into the small rituals of home, one doorway at a time. The bus stop became the strongest ritual of all. Laura did not like driving on winter roads if she could avoid it. Route 12 passed 3 blocks from their house and stopped less than a block from the library, so most mornings she walked to the wooden shelter on Birch Lane. Ridge went with her. At first, Wade had taken the leash. Within weeks, the pattern belonged mostly to Laura and the dog. At 7:10, she left the house. At the stop, Ridge sat beside the bench while Laura waited. When the bus rounded the bend, Laura crouched, put both hands against Ridge's cheeks, and said the same words. "Home before dark." Ridge watched her bored. Then he remained at the curb until the bus disappeared. Only then would he turn for home. Wade initially called the ritual ridiculous. Then Ridge began waiting by the front door at 4:45 without anyone telling him the time, and Wade stopped calling it anything. Near 5, Ridge would find Wade. Look at him. Look at the doorknob. Look back at Wade. "All right," Wade would say. "Let's go get her." One evening in December, snow slowed Route 12 by nearly 15 minutes. Wade and Ridge stood under the little shelter, while wind pushed loose powder across the road. After 10 minutes, Wade stamped, feeling back into his boots. "She knows where we live." Ridge remained seated. 5 more minutes. The dog did not move. Wade looked down at him. "I outrank you." Ridge watched the empty road. The bus arrived 4 minutes later. When the folding door opened, Laura stepped down laughing before she had both feet on the pavement. "I see who won." Ridge pushed his head into her coat, while Wade brushed snow from his shoulders. "This dog has no respect for authority." Laura wrapped one gloved hand around Ridge's collar and smiled at Wade. Maybe he has good judgment. Another afternoon, the bus arrived crowded after a town meeting. People stepped down in a line. 2 teenagers, a man carrying grocery bags, 3 women from the courthouse, an older couple Wade recognized from church. Wade could not see Laura. Ridge stood before she appeared. His ears rose. His whole body changed. A second later, Laura came down the steps behind a tall man in a red parka. Iris Nolan, the 68-year-old driver with silver-gray hair and square glasses, leaned toward the open door. "That dog keeps better time than my dashboard clock." Laura reached down as Ridge greeted her. "No, he knows people." Iris laughed and pulled the door closed. Wade remembered that sentence on the February morning when Ridge refused to behave as if the day were ordinary. The 3 of them reached Birch Lane at 7:08. Fresh snow squeaked beneath their boots. Ridge walked close to Laura's left leg, occasionally lifting his nose toward her hand. "You're crowding me, mister," Laura told him. Ridge ignored the complaint. Wade noticed Laura press her lips together as they approached the shelter. "Head still hurt?" "A little." "We can turn around." Laura gave him a sideways look. "And call the library to report that my husband and dog formed a committee? You'd lose the vote." "I always lose that vote." The banter was light, but Wade kept watching her. For most of Wade's adult life, observation had been tied to consequence. Changes in posture, sound, or behavior mattered. Civilian life had required him to unlearn the belief that every irregularity meant danger. Laura had helped with that too. Sometimes a headache was only a headache. Sometimes a dog was only being possessive. Sometimes the world allowed an ordinary morning to remain ordinary. Route 12 appeared around the bend. Ridge stopped. Laura took another step. The dog moved ahead of her. At first, Wade thought Ridge had seen something near the curb. Then Laura reached the open bus door, and Ridge turned sideways in front of the first step. "Ridge." Wade's voice was firm. The dog looked at him but did not move. Iris remained behind the wheel, one hand resting near the door controls. Laura tried to step around. Ridge shifted with her. No barking, no raised hackles, just refusal. Several passengers looked through the windows. Wade stepped forward. "Ridge, back." The dog's ears flicked toward Wade's voice, but his body stayed between Laura and the bus. Laura looked down at him, and the amusement faded from her face. For the first time that morning, she seemed unsettled. She crouched in the snow. "Hey!" Ridge immediately lowered his head toward her. Laura put both arms around his neck. "It's one work day." The dog pressed his muzzle against her cream scarf. Wade saw Iris watching from the driver's seat. Not impatiently. Carefully. Laura drew back and placed both hands along Ridge's face. "Home before dark." For several seconds, nothing happened. Then Ridge stepped aside. Laura rose. She kissed Wade quickly on the cheek. "I'll call you at lunch so you can both confirm I survived shelving biographies." "Do that." Laura smiled and climbed aboard. The doors folded shut. Ridge stood at the curb. The bus pulled away. Normally, by the time Route 12 passed the second intersection, Ridge would turn toward home. That morning he did not. The bus disappeared. Ridge stayed. Wade waited. "Come on." Nothing. A pickup passed, tires hissing over wet pavement. Ridge stared at the empty bend. Ridge. One ear moved. The dog remained still. Wade looked at the road where Laura had vanished and felt the first small pressure of unease settle beneath his ribs. He told himself not to be ridiculous. He had spent years learning not to turn instinct into prophecy. Home, Wade said. This time, Ridge finally turned. On the walk back, the dog remained unusually close to Wade, but kept looking over his shoulder. Wade decided he would call Laura before noon. That decision made him feel better, because decisions usually did. Back home, he refilled Ridge's water, carried his coffee to the garage, and returned to a small engine he had promised to repair for a neighbor. Work had always been the cleanest way to quiet his mind. A machine either fit together or it did not. A stripped screw could be replaced. A fuel line could be traced. Cause led to effect. By 10:30, Wade had nearly convinced himself the morning meant nothing. Ridge had not. The dog moved between the kitchen window and the garage door several times. Once he stood outside the garage and looked toward the street. Wade wiped his hands on a rag. She's been gone 3 hours. Ridge looked at him. She does this 5 days a week. The dog walked back toward the house. Wade almost laughed. Instead, he checked the time. 10:47. Too early for Laura's lunch. He returned to the engine. At 11:36, Wade reached for his phone, then noticed grease on his fingers. He set it back down. 5 minutes. Ridge, lying just outside the open garage door, lifted his head. Wade removed a housing, cleaned the edge, replaced a cracked gasket, and lost himself in the sequence. 5 minutes became 14. His phone rang. Wade glanced at the screen. Unknown Silver Pine number. Something in him went still. He answered. Wade Holston. A woman's voice came through, breathless but controlled. Mr. Holston, I'm calling from the Silver Pine Community Library. Are you Laura Holston's husband? Wade straightened. Across the garage, Ridge rose to his feet. Yes. There were voices behind the caller, a door opening, someone saying something too far from the receiver to understand. Mr. Holston, your wife just... Where is Laura? Wade's question cut across hers. Ridge took one step toward him, and for the first time that morning, the house no longer felt like a place waiting for Laura to come home. Where is Laura? Wade's voice came out harder than he intended. The woman from the Silver Pine Community Library answered quickly. Laura had collapsed at work. An ambulance had taken her to North Valley Medical Center. The woman did not try to explain more over the phone. Wade was already moving before she finished giving him the entrance number. Ridge followed him through the garage. Wade stopped at the truck, one hand on the door. For one irrational second, he considered taking the dog with him. Ridge stood close enough that Wade could feel the animal's breath against his leg. You stay. Ridge did not move. Wade opened the mudroom door and pointed inside. Stay, Ridge. This time, the German Shepherd obeyed. Wade shut the door, crossed the driveway, and backed the truck through the snow. He did not remember turning onto Birch Street. He remembered traffic lights. He remembered a delivery truck moving too slowly. He remembered looking at the clock on the dashboard and calculating distance, speed, and the fastest route to the hospital, as if numbers could give him some control over what had already happened. For much of his adult life, Wade had been trained to enter confusion and reduce it. Find the problem. Identify what mattered. Act. At North Valley Medical Center, there was nothing for him to do. A nurse took Laura's name and led him to a private waiting room with 2 chairs, a low table, and a painting of a lake that Wade immediately hated because it was too calm. He stood instead of sitting. A physician came in 20 minutes later. Dr. Harlan Myers was perhaps 50, with tired eyes behind thin glasses and the careful voice of a man who had delivered bad news before. He explained that Laura had suffered a catastrophic cerebral hemorrhage caused by a vascular condition no one had previously detected. There were other words: pressure, rapid onset, extensive damage. Wade understood every sentence separately. Together, they refused to form anything useful. What are you doing now? Wade asked. Dr. Myers paused. That pause was the first answer. We did everything medically appropriate when she arrived." Wade looked at him. The doctor continued more quietly. "Mr. Halston, I'm very sorry. Your wife did not survive." The room did not change. The air vent continued humming. Someone pushed a cart down the hallway. A telephone rang beyond the door. Wade stared at the doctor as if there had been a failure in communication. "Are you sure?" "Yes." "There's nothing else?" "No." Wade nodded once. It was the kind of nod he gave when receiving instructions. Then he asked, "What do I need to sign?" Dr. Myers did not answer immediately. Wade saw something in the doctor's expression that made him look away. For years, people had mistaken Wade's silence for strength. Sometimes it was strength. Sometimes silence was simply the last wall standing. A nurse named Ellen eventually brought him a clear property bag. "I'm sorry, Mr. Halston." Wade thanked her automatically. The bag contained Laura's wallet, phone, keys, a paperback mystery novel, and the canvas lunch tote she carried to work. He picked up the keys first. There was a little brass library charm on the ring. Then the phone. Then the book. All manageable things. Objects had weight. They could be held. The lunch tote was heavier than he expected. Wade unzipped it. Inside was the sandwich he had watched Laura make that morning. An apple, a small container of almonds, and a folded paper napkin. Nothing had been touched. Wade stared at the sandwich. At 7 that morning, Laura had been looking for her glove. At 8, she had been at work. Sometime before lunch, the ordinary machinery of their life had simply stopped. He sat down. It was the first time he had sat since entering the hospital. The lunch tote rested between his hands. Wade lowered his head. He did not cry. Not yet. He only sat there long enough for the nurse to quietly close the door. A knock came sometime later. Wade expected another hospital employee. Instead, Marion Holt entered. Wade knew Marion from holiday dinners at the library, and from the half-dozen occasions Laura had dragged him into helping move shelves or repair something the city had postponed fixing. At 63, Marion was thin and sharp-featured, with short silver-white hair and reading glasses hanging from a cord around her neck. She carried herself like someone who disliked wasting words. That afternoon, she looked 10 years older than Wade remembered. "I came as soon as they said you were still here," Marion said. Wade rose. Marion looked at the clear property bag. Her eyes stopped at the lunch tote. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Marion sat in the other chair. Wade remained standing. "She was shelving returns," Marion said. Then she stopped and put one hand on the desk. Wade's attention sharpened. "Did she say anything?" "She said she felt dizzy." Before that, Marion thought, she was quieter than usual. How long? Marion looked up at him. "A few days, maybe." The answer struck harder than Wade expected. "What do you mean, a few days?" "She said she was tired. I asked if she was getting sick. Laura said she'd been staying up too late reading." Wade looked toward the window. That morning, Laura had touched her temple. Twice in the kitchen, again near the bus shelter. He had noticed. He had asked. He had offered to drive. Then he had let her go. Marion watched Wade's face change. "Don't," she said. Wade looked at her. "You don't know what I'm thinking. I knew your wife for 13 years. I know exactly what kind of argument you're having with yourself." Wade folded his arms. Marion continued before he could interrupt. "You asked if she was all right. She said she had a headache. And what did she tell you?" "That she was fine. Then Laura answered you." Wade's jaw tightened. "I could have insisted. And Laura could have told you to stop treating her like she was one of your operations." Despite everything, Wade could hear Laura saying exactly that. The resemblance was cruel enough to almost make him smile. Almost. Marion lowered her voice. You loved a grown woman, Wade. You didn't command one. He looked back at the lunch tote. Understanding the truth of Marion's words did nothing to stop the other question. What if it arrived anyway? What if he had taken the headache seriously? What if he had put Laura in the truck? What if Ridge's behavior that morning had meant something more than attachment? What if Wade had spent too many years teaching himself not to overreact, only to choose the one morning when he should have? There were no answers. That was what made the questions dangerous. Before Marion left, she touched the back of Wade's chair. "Call me when you need the library things handled." Wade nodded. Marion reached the doorway, then stopped. "And Wade?" He looked up. She was laughing this morning. The word surprised him. Marion gave a small, tired smile. "She told us Ridge nearly staged a protest at the bus." Wade looked down. For the first time since entering the hospital, he thought clearly about the dog waiting at home. It was after dark when Wade finally drove back into Silver Pine. Snow had started again, fine and dry in the headlights. He passed the library without looking directly at it. He drove past Birch Lane. That took more effort. At home, the porch light was on because Laura had left it on that morning. Wade parked. For several seconds, he remained behind the wheel with the clear property bag on the passenger seat. Then he carried it inside. The house was silent. "Ridge?" "Nothing." Wade set the bag on the kitchen table. "Ridge." He checked the living room, the bedroom, the garage. The dog bed near Laura's reading chair was empty. Wade walked quickly into the mudroom. The small dog door leading to the fenced backyard hung closed. He opened the back door. Fresh tracks crossed the yard. Ridges. They went toward the older section of fence along the alley. Snow had drifted against the boards, forming a bank high enough to reduce the effective height of the fence. Deep paw marks climbed the slope. On the other side, another set landed in the alley. Wade stared at them. Ridge had never jumped that fence. He did not need to ask where the dog had gone. Wade turned toward the house. The kitchen clock showed 6:09. He was already reaching for his truck keys. Birch Lane was almost empty when Wade arrived. The wooden shelter stood beneath a yellow streetlight, snow blowing through the open side. Ridge sat beneath it. For one terrible moment, relief was all Wade felt. Then headlights appeared around the bend. Route 12. Ridge stood. Wade stopped across the street. He could have called the dog. He did not. The bus pulled alongside the shelter. Its folding doors opened. An older man in a brown coat stepped down. Ridge leaned forward. A woman carrying 2 grocery bags followed. Ridge watched her. Then a teenage boy with headphones. Ridge looked beyond him toward the bus steps. No one else came. The driver waited. Wade could see Iris Nolan behind the windshield. She looked at Ridge, then across the road. She saw Wade. Neither of them moved. Finally, Iris closed the doors. Route 12 pulled away. Ridge stood in the road's reflected light until the red taillights disappeared. Then he sat again. Wade felt something inside his chest give way without making a sound. That morning, Laura had promised the dog she would be home before dark. Dark had come. Ridge was still waiting for her to keep her part. Wade crossed the street. Ridge turned his head. There was no excitement in the dog's reaction, no joyful rush. He simply looked past Wade once, back toward the curve. Wade crouched and clipped the leash to Ridge's dark brown collar. "Come on." Ridge resisted for half a second, then followed. Wade could not bring himself to say the word, home. The next morning, at 7:10, Ridge stood at the front door. Wade was sitting at the kitchen table with Laura's coffee mug still on the rack above the sink. He watched the dog. No. Ridge remained at the door. "There's nowhere to go." The dog looked at the handle. Wade turned it away. He spent that morning making phone calls he did not remember afterward. the funeral home, insurance, a relative of Laura's in another state. Each conversation required Wade to repeat the same fact in slightly different words. By late afternoon, Ridge had begun pacing. At 4:47, he stood at the door again. Wade locked it. Ridge lay down on the mat. At the sound of a diesel engine outside, his head rose immediately. The vehicle passed. Ridge lowered his head. The next day, Wade tried something different. At 4:30, he put the leash on Ridge and took him toward Lake Rowan instead of Birch Lane. Ridge walked 20 yards, then stopped. Wade tugged lightly. "Come on." Ridge looked back toward town. Wade continued another few steps. The German Shepherd turned around. Not violently, not frantically, simply with certainty. He pulled toward Birch Lane. "Ridge." The dog kept going. Wade followed far enough to understand this was not a mistake. He stopped. "No." Ridge looked at him. Something in Wade snapped. "She's not coming back." The words were louder than he intended. Ridge froze. For several seconds, the dog only watched him. Wade's anger vanished as quickly as it had come. He looked away first, because the sentence had not really been for Ridge. It was the first time Wade had said it where he could hear it himself. Laura was not coming back. He stood on the snowy sidewalk holding the leash while Ridge waited. Then Wade loosened his grip. "Fine." They went to Birch Lane. That became the beginning of a new routine Wade did not want. Each afternoon, Ridge led the first part of the walk. At the shelter, the dog took his usual place near the bench. Wade stood behind him. The bus arrived. Ridge watched. Wade watched Ridge. Then they went home. Days began to divide themselves around that one act. Wade hated it. He also began to understand that without Ridge, he might not have left the house at all. Iris never asked Wade what had happened. She had driven Laura long enough to understand, from absence alone. On the fourth afternoon, when the last passenger stepped off Route 12, Iris kept the door open. Ridge stood near the curb. Iris looked down at him, then at Wade. "He still thinks tomorrow will be different." Wade shoved his hands deeper into his coat pockets. The answer came before he had time to protect himself from it. "Maybe I do too." Iris's expression changed, but she did not offer sympathy. Wade was grateful for that. She simply nodded and closed the door. The bus moved on. Ridge sat again for several seconds before Wade touched the leash. They walked home together. That night, Wade passed Laura's reading chair and found Ridge lying beneath it. For the first time, Wade did not tell him to move. Several more days passed. One afternoon, the sky was clear enough that the low sun turned the snowbanks gold. Route 12 arrived almost on time. Ridge stood. 3 passengers got off. None was Laura. Iris leaned toward the open door. "Wade." He looked up. "Laura once told me something about Ridge." Wade stepped closer. "What?" A passenger several rows back called toward Iris. "Are we still going downtown?" Iris checked the dashboard clock. She had a route to finish. She looked at Wade again. Not about the way he waits for her. Before Wade could ask another question, Iris pulled the door closed. The bus eased away from the curb. Wade stood beneath the shelter, watching it disappear. Beside him, Ridge was still looking down the road. For the first time since Laura died, Wade found himself wondering about something other than the moment she had left. He looked at Ridge. What had Laura seen in this dog that Wade had somehow missed? 3 days after Iris Nolan told Wade that Laura had once said something about Ridge, Wade found himself waiting for the answer. That bothered him. He had spent the first weeks after Laura's death trying not to expect anything from the next hour. Expectations belonged to a life where people came home when they said they would. Yet at 4:45 that afternoon, Wade was already wearing his coat. Ridge stood near the front door. The German Shepherd had not needed to ask. Outside, Silverpine was settling into the pale blue light that came before sunset. The sidewalks were packed with old snow, the roofs lined with icicles, and the air carried the smell of wood smoke from houses along Birch Street. Wade and Ridge walked the same 3 blocks. By now, the route had become familiar in a different way. Before Laura died, Wade had known the stop because it was where they went to get her. Now he knew which snowbank Ridge sniffed, which corner the dog slowed at, and which side of the wooden shelter blocked the wind. Ridge sat. Wade remained standing. Route 12 appeared 2 minutes later. 3 people got off. Ridge watched them. No Laura. The disappointment no longer came as a surprise, which somehow made it worse. Iris kept the bus door open after the final passenger stepped down. Wade moved closer. "You said Laura told you something." Iris looked at Ridge first. She did. Wade waited. Iris rested one hand on the steering wheel. "It was last fall. Your garage door was open. Ridge was standing out there staring at you." Wade remembered dozens of afternoons like that. Iris continued. "Laura told me you thought Ridge was her dog." "He was." Iris gave him a level look. "That's not what she said." Wade felt irritation rise before he understood why. "What did she say?" Iris's voice softened. She said, "Wade thinks Ridge is my dog. Some days I think that dog watches over Wade more than I do." For a moment, Wade heard nothing except the engine idling beneath the bus floor. The sentence did not sound important enough to have survived Laura. That was exactly why it did. Laura had not said it before surgery, not written it in a letter, not offered it as wisdom for a future she knew she would never see. She had probably been holding coffee, maybe laughing, maybe watching Ridge stand at the garage like he had a job to do, an ordinary sentence from an ordinary day. Wade disliked it immediately. Iris saw that too. "I'm not telling you what she meant." "Good. I didn't think you'd appreciate it." The corner of Iris's mouth moved slightly. It was the closest either of them came to humor. Then she closed the door and drove on. Wade watched the bus disappear. Beside him, Ridge stayed seated. Wade looked down. "You were her dog." Ridge stared toward the bend. Wade heard how childish the sentence sounded. He turned for home. Ridge waited another few seconds before following. The problem with Laura's remark was that it followed Wade into the house. He saw Ridge lying beneath her reading chair and remembered the dog coming to the garage at dinner time. He saw Ridge watching him from the hallway and remembered the mornings after Wade had left the Navy, when sleep came poorly, and Ridge sometimes appeared at the bedroom door before Laura woke. Wade had always explained those things through Laura. She fed the dog. She trained him. She gave him commands. If Ridge came looking for Wade, it was because Laura had sent him. That explanation had been comfortable. It kept the lines clean. Laura and Ridge had their relationship. Wade loved Laura. Therefore, Wade cared about Ridge. The equation had worked until Laura was removed from it. Now Ridge was still here, and Wade did not know what that made them. The house offered no answer. It barely seemed to recognize that Laura had left. Her deep teal coat remained on the hook near the mudroom. The bird-patterned mug she liked was still on the second shelf because Wade had never moved it. A paperback rested face down beside her reading chair, exactly where she had left it. Her shoes were still under the bench. At night, Wade slept on the sofa. He told himself it was because he fell asleep watching television. He had not turned the television on in over a week. The bedroom door remained mostly closed. Ridge had developed his own geography of absence. Morning near the mudroom, midday beneath Laura's chair, 4:45 at the front door. Wade began measuring time by where the dog was lying. One Thursday, heavy snow began shortly after lunch. By 4, the town warning system advised people to stay off unnecessary roads. Wade looked through the front window at snow sweeping sideways across the street. "No." Ridge stood near the door. "We're not going." Ridge waited. Wade carried a mug of coffee into the living room. 10 minutes later, Ridge was still there. "Not happening." The German Shepherd sat. At 4:47, Ridge looked at the doorknob, then at Wade. Wade tried to ignore him. At 4:52, Ridge lay down in front of the door without taking his eyes off Wade. Wade felt an unreasonable anger building. Laura would have had enough sense to stay home in this. Ridge's ears lifted at her name. Wade stopped. The anger went out of him. He put the mug down. "Fine." He dressed for the weather. Outside, the snow struck his face hard enough to make him turn his collar up. Ridge lowered his head into the wind and kept walking. The bus was late. Of course it was. Wade and Ridge waited inside the shelter. No one else came. For 15 minutes there was only the wind, the scraping sound of a plow several streets away, and Ridge's steady attention on the road. Then headlights appeared. Route 12 crawled around the bend. Iris opened the doors. There were only 2 passengers. Neither was Laura. But when Wade turned back toward home, he realized something that unsettled him. Without Ridge, he would not have left the house that day. He might not have spoken to anyone, might not have felt snow sting his face, might not have heard another human voice. The dog was waiting for Laura, but every afternoon, Ridge was also making Wade stand up. The realization was too uncomfortable to examine closely. So Wade did what he had always done with uncomfortable things. He kept moving. Over the next 2 weeks, Silverpine began quietly noticing the dog at Birch Lane. Not dramatically. Small towns rarely needed an announcement to learn anything. Mr. Coulter, the 71-year-old owner of Coulter's Bakery, began seeing Wade and Ridge pass his window each afternoon. One evening he stepped outside carrying a small paper bag. For the dog, Wade looked inside. A few pieces of plain-baked chicken. "You selling poultry now?" Mr. Coulter shrugged. "I contain multitudes." Wade almost smiled. The older man handed him the bag. "No seasoning?" "Ridge appreciates your sacrifice." "Ridge has better manners than most customers." The exchange lasted less than a minute, but Wade carried the paper bag home. The next afternoon, he bought coffee from Coulter's instead of making it himself. That became another small change he did not name. A child once asked her mother why Ridge always sat at the bus stop. The mother lowered her voice, but Wade heard enough. "That dog is waiting for someone." The girl looked at Ridge. "Is she coming?" The mother hesitated. Wade kept walking. He did not blame the child. He had no answer for her that Ridge would understand either. A week later, a stranger did something Wade could not ignore. The man was maybe 30, wearing a bright ski jacket and holding his phone sideways as he approached the shelter. Ridge was sitting near the bench. Wade noticed the camera before Ridge did. The stranger spoke quietly into the phone. "This is the dog I told you about. Apparently he comes here every..." Wade stepped between the phone and Ridge. "Don't." The man lowered it slightly. "I'm not bothering him. You're recording him. It's a sweet story." Wade's face changed enough that the man lowered the phone completely. "It's not your story." There was no threat in Wade's voice. That made the boundary clearer. The stranger looked embarrassed. "Sorry." Wade nodded once. The man walked away. Ridge had watched the entire exchange. Then he turned back toward the road. That night, Wade thought about why the incident had angered him so much. He could not bear the idea of Laura becoming a 30-second story attached to sad music. He could not bear Ridge's waiting, becoming something strangers consumed between advertisements and jokes. Some griefs were public because the person had lived publicly. Laura had not. She had been his wife, Ridge's person, Marion's friend, Iris's passenger. the woman who knew which Western novels Mr. Ellis had already read. Wade wanted to protect that ordinary dignity. It was one of the few things he still knew how to protect. Marion Holt came to the house 2 days later, carrying a cardboard file box. I found more of Laura's things at the library. Wade stepped aside. Marion entered and stopped almost immediately. Her eyes moved through the room. Laura's coat, Laura's shoes, Laura's books. Nothing had changed. She did not comment. Not yet. The box held a cardigan, 2 notebooks, a framed photograph of the library staff, a small desk calendar, and the reading glasses Laura kept at work. Wade took each item and placed it on the dining table. Marion watched him. "Where do you want the box?" "Here's fine." "You want help putting anything away?" "No." Marion looked toward Laura's reading chair. Ridge was lying beneath it. "I figured." Wade heard judgment even though Marion had not put any into the words. His patience shortened. "I'm thinking about selling the house." That surprised her. "When?" "Soon." Marion studied him carefully. Wade continued before she could ask. "It's too big. Taxes are stupid. Heating half the rooms makes no sense." All of those statements were true. That made them useful. Marion placed her gloves on the table. "Where would you go?" "Cedar Hollow." "Why there?" "Quiet. Smaller houses. More land. And farther from Birch Lane." Wade looked at her. "There's that too." Marion glanced at Ridge. "Is this about him?" "It's about both of us." "Does Ridge know that?" Wade's expression hardened. "He's a dog, Marion." "Yes." She said it without offense. Then Marion looked around the room again. "Are you looking for a smaller house, Wade? Or one where Laura isn't in every corner?" Wade felt his shoulders tighten. "What difference does that make?" Marion picked up her gloves. "One is changing your life." She paused. "The other is running from it." The sentence landed exactly where she intended. Wade stepped away from the table. "You came to drop off a box." "I did." "Then you dropped it off." Marion nodded. She did not apologize. That made Wade angrier. At the door, Marion stopped. "I loved her too." Wade said nothing. Marion looked back. "I'm not telling you to keep the house." Then she left. The quiet afterward felt sharper than before. Wade stood in the dining room with Laura's work belongings spread across the table. Ridge came over and sniffed the cardigan. Wade moved it away. "Leave it." Ridge looked up. Wade immediately regretted the tone. He sat down. For several minutes, Ridge remained beside him. Then the dog rested his head on Wade's knee. Wade froze. Laura's remark came back again. "Some days I think that dog watches over Wade more than I do." Wade slowly put a hand against Ridge's neck. It was the first time in weeks he touched the dog without attaching a leash, filling a bowl, or moving him out of the way. Ridge stayed. Wade did not. After a few seconds, he stood. "I need air." But instead of walking aimlessly, Wade drove to Cedar Hollow the next morning. The place sat 7 miles north of Silver Pine, beyond Lake Rowan and a stretch of pine woods. The house he had seen online was modest, a 1-story cedar-sided home with a small garage, a fenced yard, and a frozen lake visible through the trees. The realtor talked about insulation, roof age, and property taxes. Wade listened. The numbers made sense. The house made sense. That was the appeal. No teal coat by the door, no reading chair, no bus stop 3 blocks away, no library around the corner, no room where Laura had laughed, no sidewalk where Ridge had walked beside her. Wade stood in the empty living room and told himself emptiness could be useful. He made an offer that afternoon. The sale of the Silver Pine house moved faster than Marion expected, and slower than Wade wanted. 6 weeks had passed since Laura died by the time the moving date arrived. Winter was loosening its grip, but Silver Pine still had deep snow in the shaded yards and hard white ridges along the streets. Wade packed efficiently until he reached Laura's things. Then efficiency failed. He boxed books, stopped at her scarf, packed kitchenware, left her mug, moved tools, avoided the bedroom. In the end, he hired movers for most of the furniture because he did not trust himself to decide what stayed or went. Ridge watched everything. The dog inspected each emptied room. He sniffed the legs of Laura's reading chair before 2 movers carried it outside. At the bedroom doorway, Ridge stopped. Wade was behind him. Neither went in. At 4:45, with boxes stacked in the hallway, Ridge walked to the front door. Wade looked at the clock. No bus today. Ridge looked at the handle. Wade crouched beside him. We're leaving. The words felt like an explanation, even though Wade knew they were not one Ridge could understand. By 5:15, the truck was loaded. Wade locked the front door for the last time. He expected something dramatic. Nothing came. No sudden certainty that Marion was right. No voice of Laura telling him what to do. Only a key turning in a lock. Ridge climbed into the back seat. Wade started the truck. As they pulled away, Wade watched the house in the mirror. Ridge did not. The German Shepherd stood with his front paws braced and looked out the side window toward the road that led down to Birch Lane. Wade noticed. He looked forward again. Cedar Hollow was 7 miles away. Wade told himself 7 miles was enough. The new house was quiet when they arrived. Too quiet. Boxes filled the living room. The frozen lake behind the trees caught the last of the daylight. Wade brought in Ridge's bed, bowls, and leash. He placed the water near the kitchen. Ridge walked through each room, sniffed the corners, checked the back door, returned to the front. Wade opened a box, then another. At 4:47 the next afternoon, Ridge rose from the living room floor. He walked to the front door. He looked at the handle, then at Wade, exactly as he had done in Silver Pine. Wade stood among half-open boxes and followed the dog's gaze. There was no Birch Lane outside, no wooden shelter, no Route 12, only a quiet road disappearing between snow-covered pines. For the first time, Wade understood that he had changed the address. Ridge had not changed what time it was. For the first 3 mornings in Cedar Hollow, Wade Halston woke before Ridge. That had never happened in Silver Pine. There, Ridge had usually been awake before dawn, moving quietly between the kitchen and the front window, checking the house as if the day had already assigned him work. In Cedar Hollow, the German Shepherd stayed curled on his bed until Wade crossed the room. The new house should have been easier to live in. It was smaller than the place Wade had sold in Silver Pine. 1 story, 2 bedrooms, a narrow kitchen overlooking the backyard. Beyond the fence stood a line of pines, and beyond those pines lay a lake, still frozen beneath the last hard weeks of northern winter. Morning light came through the trees in long silver bars. The place was quiet, clean, practical. Everything Wade had told himself he needed. On the first afternoon, at 4:47, Ridge walked to the front door. He looked at the handle, then at Wade. Wade had been opening a box of kitchen utensils. He stopped. No Birch Lane. Ridge waited. We don't live there anymore. The dog looked toward the door again. Wade glanced at the clock. 4:48. He told himself not to make too much of it. Routine did not disappear because the furniture had moved. He put on his coat. Come on. Instead of taking Ridge toward a bus stop that no longer existed, Wade walked him along the frozen lake. The path curved between bare birches and pines. The snow was firmer there, shaded from the afternoon sun. Ridge stayed beside Wade at first, then moved slightly ahead. For 10 minutes, Wade thought the walk might work. Then the trail turned near a break in the trees, where the county road became visible. Ridge stopped. Cars moved in both directions. He watched each one. Not every vehicle, the larger ones, the ones with deeper engines. Wade kept walking. Ridge followed after a delay. The next afternoon, Wade changed direction. He took Ridge through a residential lane where houses sat far apart behind split-rail fences. A retired couple waved from their porch. Wade lifted one hand in return. Ridge barely looked at them. At 4:52, the dog stopped at the end of the lane and turned his head toward the main road. Wade checked the time without meaning to. On the third afternoon, he tried the ball. Ridge had once treated that ball like a private emergency. Laura could roll it across the living room, and Ridge would scramble after it, then return with the proud intensity of someone delivering critical evidence. Wade threw it across the Cedar Hollow yard. Ridge chased it. He picked it up. For a moment, Wade felt relief. Then Ridge carried the ball halfway back, dropped it in the snow, and turned toward the road. Wade stood with his hands in his jacket pockets. Really? Ridge did not look at him. The ball remained between them. That evening, Wade put it beside the dog bed. By morning, it had not moved. He had expected Ridge to miss Silver Pine. He had not expected the dog to seem unfinished without it. The change became clearer over the following week. Ridge still ate breakfast, but slowly. Dinner sometimes sat untouched for an hour. He no longer followed Wade from room to room. Instead, he chose the front hallway, where he could see the door, and he began checking the yard. At first, Wade thought Ridge was learning the fence line. That would have been normal. Then Wade noticed the pattern. Ridge did not inspect the entire fence equally. He spent more time at the side gate, then the back corner near the pines, then the gap beneath a section where snow had packed against the boards. One morning, Wade found a line of paw prints running parallel to the fence, back and forth. He repaired nothing because nothing was broken. Still, the behavior stayed with him. 3 days later, a school bus passed along the county road behind the trees. The sound came first. A deep diesel rumble, air brakes, the low growl of acceleration. Ridge was lying near the kitchen doorway. He exploded to his feet. The dog crossed the room so quickly that Wade barely had time to set down his coffee. Ridge, the German Shepherd, was already at the back door. Wade opened it. Ridge ran across the yard toward the fence, stopped with both front paws braced against the packed snow, and stared through the pines. The yellow school bus was barely visible between the trunks. It moved away. Ridge tracked it until the sound faded. Then he remained there. Wade stepped into the yard. The air was cold enough to sting his lungs. Wrong bus. Ridge kept looking. Wade approached. The dog's ears slowly lowered. For a moment, Wade thought Ridge might turn back toward the house. Instead, Ridge walked along the fence again, nose low, checking the boards. Something in Wade tightened. This was no longer just missing a place. Ridge was looking for a way out of one. Wade clipped a leash to the dog's collar before bringing him inside. That night, Ridge left half his food. The next morning, he did not touch the ball. By the end of the second week, Wade stopped telling himself the dog simply needed time. Time was changing Ridge, but not in the direction Wade had expected. At Silver Pine, Ridge had grieved through movement. He went to Birch Lane. He waited. He came home. Painful as it was, the dog still had a sequence to follow. Cedar Hollow had removed the sequence. Now Ridge woke, ate when persuaded, walked because Wade attached a leash, and spent long stretches lying near the door. Wade had wanted to rescue both of them from repetition. Instead, he had taken away the only part of Ridge's day that still seemed to make sense. The thought made him defensive, even though there was no one there to accuse him. "I brought you somewhere quiet," Wade told Ridge one evening. The dog lay with his head on his paws. "You've got a yard, trees, a lake." Ridge blinked once. Wade looked around the room. Half the boxes were still unopened. Laura's reading chair sat near the window because the movers had put it there, and Wade had not decided what else to do with it. The cream scarf remained packed. Her books were packed. Her mug was packed. He had moved them 7 miles, and somehow still managed not to decide whether they belonged in this house. "You should like this place." The sentence sounded wrong as soon as he said it. Ridge did not owe him improvement. Wade called a veterinarian the next morning. Cedar Hollow Animal Clinic sat beside a hardware store on the edge of town, in a low brick building with a blue awning and snow piled against one wall. Dr. Tess Marlowe entered the exam room without ceremony. She was 57, tall and solidly built, with dark blonde hair threaded with silver and tied low at the back of her neck. Her scrub top was sage green beneath a navy fleece. She greeted Wade with a nod, then crouched several feet from Ridge rather than reaching for him immediately. "Let him decide." Ridge watched her. After a few seconds, he stepped forward and sniffed her hand. Tess began the examination with the efficiency of someone accustomed to large dogs. Weight, heart, eyes, ears, teeth, joints. She asked Wade about appetite, water intake, sleep, bowel habits, exercise, and recent environmental changes. Wade answered each question precisely. When Tess asked when the change began, he said, "After we moved." "How long ago?" "About 2 weeks. And before that?" Wade hesitated. "My wife died 6 weeks before the move." Tess stopped writing, not dramatically, just long enough to signal that the answer mattered. "Was she his primary person?" "Yes." "How long had Ridge lived with her?" 3 years. "What changed after she died?" Wade looked toward the dog. "He waited for her." "Where?" "At a bus stop." Tess nodded once. "Daily?" "Yes." "For how long?" "Until I moved." Tess set the clipboard down. She did not say the dog was heartbroken, did not tell Wade Ridge understood death. Instead, she explained what she could support. For a dog like this, attachment and routine can overlap heavily. Ridge lost Laura. Then he lost the house where her scent was strongest, the route he knew, the time-based activity he repeated every day, and the location connected to that activity. Wade leaned against the counter. "So what? I should have left him at a bus stop forever?" "No." Tess's answer came without judgment. "You made a reasonable decision. I'm saying the move cost him more structure than you may have realized." Wade looked at Ridge again. The dog had settled near his boots. "I walk him. That's good. I feed him on schedule. Also good. He gets outside. He has space." Tess waited. Wade recognized the silence as an invitation he did not want. Finally, Tess asked, "What routine have you built together?" "I just told you." "You told me how you care for him." Wade frowned. Tess folded her arms loosely. "I'm asking what the two of you do together." Wade opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Tess did not rescue him from the silence. He thought about the last 2 weeks. Morning food, leash, walk, water, another walk, dinner. Let Ridge outside. Bring Ridge inside. Everything had been maintenance, tasks. Laura had talked to Ridge while she cooked, read beside him, sent him after Wade, waited with him, laughed at him. Wade had kept the dog alive. He could not name one thing they had begun that belonged only to the two of them. Tess picked up her clipboard again. "His physical exam looks good. Keep watching the appetite. If he stops eating entirely, loses noticeable weight, or you see other changes, call me." Wade nodded. Tess added, "But I'd give him more than exercise." "What does that mean?" "Something predictable that involves you." Wade looked skeptical. Tess shrugged. "Doesn't have to be profound. Dogs don't need speeches." That almost made him smile. "Good. You don't strike me as a speech man." "No." Tess opened the exam room door. "Then start smaller." On the drive home, Ridge lay across the back seat. Wade kept hearing the question, "What do the two of you do together?" It irritated him because it was simple. Simple questions were supposed to have simple answers. That one did not. For years, Wade had thought of Ridge as Laura's dog. Even after Iris told him Laura saw something different, Wade had treated the idea as sentiment. But Tess had not known Laura. She had not known Birch Lane. She had reached the same problem from the opposite direction. Wade had responsibilities toward Ridge. He did not yet have a life with him. That evening, Wade found the old ball beside the dog bed. He picked it up. Ridge lifted his head. Wade rolled the ball across the room. It bumped gently against the wall. Ridge watched it stop. Did not move. Strong start. Wade retrieved it himself. The next morning he tried a longer walk before breakfast. Ridge walked. Nothing more. At noon, Wade sat outside on the back step and brought Ridge with him. The dog remained standing for several minutes before lying down nearby. No breakthrough. No sudden recovery. Wade began to understand that Tess had not given him a trick. She had given him work. Different work. Work with no measurable result. That was harder. 2 nights later, wet snow began falling after dark. At 8:16, the power went out. The house dropped into silence. Wade checked the breaker first. Nothing inside. He looked through the front window and saw 2 neighboring houses were dark as well. Utility outage. He found flashlights, brought in more firewood, and lit the fireplace. Ridge settled near the edge of the rug. Wade could have gone to the kitchen, could have unpacked another box. Instead, he sat on the floor. Not close to Ridge, just close enough to share the heat. The fire made the room look less empty. For several minutes, Wade listened to wood crack and wind brush snow against the windows. Then he said, "Tess thinks we need a hobby." Ridge's right ear moved. "Don't get excited." The dog looked at him. Wade stared into the fire. He had spent years avoiding sentences that did not lead to action. This one had nowhere to go. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do either." Ridge stayed still. Wade's voice became quieter. "She knew how to make this look easy." The dog's eyes remained on him. Wade swallowed. "I don't know what to do when she's not here." Nothing changed for several seconds. Then Ridge stood. He crossed the small space between them. Wade expected him to keep going toward the door. Instead, Ridge lowered himself beside Wade and rested his head on the floor near Wade's boot. Not on his knee, not against him. Near him. Wade looked down. His hand moved once toward Ridge, then stopped. The dog closed his eyes. Wade left his hand on the floor between them. It was not forgiveness, not healing, not some message from Laura sent through an animal. It was simply the first moment in Cedar Hollow when neither of them seemed to be waiting for something else to happen. The power returned 40 minutes later. Wade did not stand immediately. The next morning, Ridge ate most of his breakfast. Wade noticed. He deliberately did not call it progress. Around noon, a delivery truck turned into the driveway. Wade had ordered storage shelves for the garage several days earlier. The driver, a young man in a knit cap, waved from the cab. "Got 2 boxes. Side entrance okay?" "Yeah." Snow had drifted along the side gate during the night. The driver pulled it open with some effort, dragged the long packages through, and set them beside the garage. Ridge watched from the back steps. Wade signed the handheld screen. "Appreciated." The driver swung the gate shut. It appeared closed. Neither man noticed that packed snow had built beneath the lower edge. The latch met the post, but did not drop fully into place. The truck left. Wade carried 1 package into the garage. Ridge walked toward the side fence. Wade saw him. "Leave it." Ridge stopped. For the previous 2 weeks, Wade had seen the dog check that same section more than once. This time, Ridge returned to the porch. Wade relaxed. An hour later, Wade realized he had left a stack of split firewood in the shed at the rear of the property. He put on gloves and went outside. Ridge was lying in the living room when Wade closed the door. The trip to the shed took less than 5 minutes. Wade loaded an armful of wood and came back. He opened the rear door. Silence. Ridge? No movement. Wade dropped the firewood beside the stove. Ridge. He checked the living room. Kitchen, hall, dog bed. Empty. Wade crossed quickly to the back door. The yard was empty. His eyes moved immediately to the fence. The side gate stood open several inches. Wade reached it in seconds. Packed snow beneath the gate showed where the latch had failed. Beyond it, fresh paw prints crossed the narrow side path. Wade stepped through. The tracks reached the driveway, then continued toward the road. He followed for 30 yards before stopping. There was no wandering pattern, no circles, no searching between trees. Ridge had left the property and taken a direction. South. Wade looked along the quiet road disappearing through the pines. Cedar Hollow was behind him. Silver Pine lay somewhere beyond those trees and roads. For the first time since arriving at the new house, Wade did not wonder what Ridge was missing. He wondered where the dog believed he could still find it. Wade stood in the open side gate and looked south. Ridge's tracks crossed the fresh snow in a straight enough line to make one thing clear. The dog had not slipped out to explore Cedar Hollow. He was going somewhere. For several seconds, Wade simply stared. Then habit took over. He went back inside, grabbed his phone, keys, gloves, and Ridge's leash. He photographed the paw prints near the gate before wind or another snowfall softened them. Not because he expected to track Ridge across 7 miles of roads, but because doing something precise steadied his breathing. He called Ridge's name once more from the driveway. Nothing answered except wind in the pines. Wade got into the truck. The first search area was close. Ridge had been gone only minutes. Wade drove the road in both directions, stopping at mailboxes, trail entrances, and the turn toward the frozen lake. At each stop, he got out, called, listened, and looked for fresh tracks where the snow had not been disturbed by tires. Near a stand of birches, he found prints. They followed the shoulder for perhaps 100 yards, then vanished where a county plow had scraped the road clean. Wade stood beside the truck and forced himself not to turn one clue into certainty. South did not automatically mean Silver Pine. Ridge could have followed a smell. He could have been startled by traffic. He could have turned. Wade knew all of that. It did not stop him from looking south again. His next call was to Dr. Tess Marlowe. She answered from the clinic. How long? Maybe 20 minutes when I noticed. Collar and tag. Yes. Current number? Yes. Good. I'll call if anybody brings him in. Wade looked down the road. He's headed somewhere. Tess was quiet for half a second. That's different from knowing where. I know. Good. Keep knowing that. Even under the circumstances, Wade almost resented how precisely she had found the weak point in his thinking. Tess continued. Call the county non-emergency line. If he's using roads, somebody may see him. And don't spend so much time looking at the ground that you miss the people who saw him pass. Wade ended the call and did exactly that. He contacted the local sheriff's office, gave Ridge's description, and emphasized that the dog wasn't aggressive but might avoid strangers. Then he began asking. A woman collecting mail had seen nothing. A man clearing snow from a driveway thought he had heard a dog bark toward the lake, but Wade checked the area and found no sign of Ridge. At the small gas station near the county road, Wade showed the cashier a photograph on his phone. The cashier leaned close to the screen. Big shepherd? About 80 pounds. Brown collar, brass tag. The young man shook his head. Not since I came on shift. Wade left his number anyway. 38 minutes had passed, then 53. The search began widening because there was nowhere else for it to go. Wade drove slowly enough to study shoulders and intersections without becoming a hazard to everyone behind him. He stopped twice to check tracks, that turned out to belong to smaller dogs. At the old mill road, the snow beneath the trees showed a set of large paw prints heading downhill. Wade followed on foot. The prints crossed behind a maintenance shed, then doubled back. At the bottom of the slope, they disappeared among tire marks. For the first time, Wade could see Ridge's route as something imperfect. The dog was not moving through the landscape with a map. He was making choices, checking, correcting, possibly following one familiar smell until it faded, then another. That should have reassured Wade. Instead, it made the distance ahead feel larger. Silver Pine was 7 miles from Cedar Hollow by road. 7 miles was not impossible for a healthy German Shepherd, but it was long enough for mistakes, long enough for traffic, long enough for the weather to change. Wade returned to the truck and called Marion Holt. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Wade?" Ridge got out. Her tone changed immediately. "When?" "About an hour ago." "Where are you?" "South edge of Cedar Hollow." "Do you think he's coming here?" Wade gripped the steering wheel. "I don't know." That answer cost him more than it should have. He had always preferred having a theory. Marion said, "I'll keep an eye outside the library. If you see him, don't chase him. I know how dogs work." "Marion, I won't chase him." Wade closed his eyes for a second. "Thank you." He ended the call and looked at the empty passenger seat. Ridge's leash lay there. The brass clip knocked lightly against the console whenever the truck moved. At the house, Wade had thought of Ridge as the last living connection to Laura. Now, with every mile of empty road, that thought began to feel inadequate. He kept driving. 2 hours after Ridge disappeared, Wade reached a roadside produce stand that was closed for winter. A pickup with a small utility trailer was parked beside it while the driver tightened a strap. Wade pulled over. The driver was a broad man in his late 50s, wearing a faded red cap and insulated coveralls. He listened while Wade described Ridge. The man's face changed. "Black and tan?" "Big Shepherd." Wade stepped closer. "Yes." "Left ear sit a little funny." Wade's pulse jumped. "When he relaxes." The driver pointed toward the south road. "Saw one maybe an hour ago, trotting that way." "Where?" "Just past the old county marker." He came out of the trees, walked to the shoulder a while. "Was he hurt?" "Didn't look like it." "Did he keep going south?" The driver nodded. "Until the road curved. That's all I saw." Wade thanked him and hurried back to the truck. For the first time, he had more than a direction. He had a time, a location, and a dog, matching Ridge's most specific feature. Wade checked the map. The county marker sat less than 4 miles from Silver Pine. He called Marion again. "Still nothing here," she said. "He's heading south." "Toward town?" "Looks like it." Marion hesitated. "Toward the house?" That was the question Wade had been avoiding. He looked through the windshield at the road ahead. "Maybe." He ended the call and accelerated within the speed limit. For the next 20 minutes, Wade's mind tried to convert uncertainty into sequence. Ridge knew Silver Pine. Ridge knew the old house. Ridge had made the trip between the two towns several times in Wade's truck since they moved. He had also walked pieces of the route over the years, near Lake Rowan, along the southern trail, around the road leading into town. That did not mean Ridge knew all 7 miles. But dogs did not need street names. They used scent, landmarks, direction, repetition. And Ridge had been trying to leave Cedar Hollow almost since the day they arrived. The thought hit Wade with enough force that he loosened his grip on the wheel. This had not begun when the gate failed. The gate had only given Ridge an opportunity. The intention had been building for days. Wade remembered Ridge walking the fence, watching the road, running to the sound of the school bus, waiting at 5. Wade had noticed every piece. He simply had not understood what they formed. Another hour passed. No call from the sheriff, no call from Tess, no sighting at the library. Wade drove through the northern edge of Silver Pine and felt the town close around him in a way Cedar Hollow never had. The bakery, the hardware store, the turn toward the library. Every location carried Laura. He had moved 7 miles to avoid exactly this feeling. Now, he would have given anything to see Ridge standing in the middle of it. At a red light, Wade reached toward the passenger seat for the leash. His hand closed around the worn leather. He remembered the night without power. Ridge lying near his boot. Tess's question. What do the two of you do together? Wade had thought the answer was nothing. Now he remembered other things. Ridge waiting while Wade locked the Cedar Hollow door. Ridge watching him make coffee. Ridge walking the lake path even when he did not want to. Ridge sleeping near the fire. Ridge looking at Wade as if he expected something Wade had not yet learned how to give. The light turned green. Wade did not move. A horn sounded behind him. He drove. The thought followed. If Ridge disappeared for good, Wade would lose the last creature who remembered Laura's life from inside their home. That was true, but it was no longer the whole truth. Wade wanted Ridge back, even if Laura's name were never spoken again. He wanted the dog who refused his ball, the dog who watched school buses, the dog who had silently shared a dark room with him. Not because Ridge preserved Laura, because somewhere in the weeks after Laura died, Ridge had become part of what remained. Wade had been so afraid of replacing Laura that he had mistaken attachment for betrayal. He said it aloud in the empty truck. Damn it, Ridge. His voice broke on the dog's name. That frightened him more than anger would have. His phone rang. Unknown. Silver Pine number. Wade answered before the second ring. Wade Halston. A man said, I think I have your dog. Wade pulled safely onto the shoulder. Where? The address came first. Wade knew it before the man finished. His old house. For 1 second, Wade felt such powerful relief that he closed his eyes. Is he with you? Not exactly. Wade opened them again. What does that mean? The man introduced himself as Owen Price, the new owner. His voice was careful, apologetic. The dog showed up maybe 20 minutes ago. He was standing on the front porch. Is he still there? No, that's why I'm calling. Wade's relief collapsed into urgency. Owen explained. His 8-year-old daughter had seen Ridge through the front window. At first, the family assumed he belonged to a neighbor. Ridge walked up and down the porch, sniffed the bottom of the front door, then went to the living room window. He kept looking inside, Owen said. Wade said nothing. We didn't open the door. He's a big dog, and we have a child. But I went around through the garage and read the number on his tag. That was the right thing. My daughter wanted to bring him a bowl of water. I told her to stay back. Good. Wade was already turning the truck around. Owen continued. He wasn't acting mean, just focused. Wade knew the word. What happened? He looked through the window for a while. Then he walked back into the yard. I called the number. By the time I came back around, he was leaving. Which direction? Toward the center of town. Wade's hand tightened around the phone. I'm 5 minutes away. The old Holston house looked both familiar and wrong. A different SUV sat in the driveway. A small sled leaned against the garage. Someone had hung a bright wreath on the door Laura once complained was too plain. Owen Price met Wade outside. He was in his late 30s, wearing a gray sweater under an unzipped coat. His daughter watched through the living room window. Wade looked at the glass. That had been Laura's window. Her reading chair used to sit just inside it. Now there was a pale sectional sofa, a floor lamp, and a pile of children's books. The curtains were yellow instead of Laura's blue-gray. Different lives filled the room. Owen pointed toward the porch. He stood right there. Wade climbed the steps. Fresh paw prints marked the snow. Ridge had approached the door, moved to the window, returned to the door, then crossed back into the yard. Wade crouched beside the tracks. He did not pretend to know what Ridge had thought, but the sequence was visible. The dog had checked the place, and then left. Owen came closer but kept a respectful distance. "Was this your house?" "Yes." The answer sounded strange. Owen glanced toward the window. "My wife said the dog looked like he knew it." "He did. Did somebody here own him before?" Wade stood. "My wife." Owen's expression softened. Wade did not want sympathy. Fortunately, Owen seemed to understand. He only said, "I'm sorry." Wade nodded. Then he looked at the road. If Ridge's goal had been to return home, this should have been the end. The dog had made it. The porch, the door, the window. Why leave? Wade looked through the window again. No Laura. Not her chair. Not her books. Not her scent in any strong form after weeks of new occupants. The house was still a location. It was no longer the answer Ridge had been searching for. Wade checked his phone. 4:43. His breathing changed. Owen noticed. "You know where he went?" Wade did not answer immediately. He dialed Marion instead. She picked up. "I was about to call you. Still nothing at the library." "He came to the old house. Is he there?" "No." Marion went silent. Wade stared toward the street. 4:44. Near 5, Ridge had always gone somewhere. Not because a house told him to, because Laura came home. Marion finally asked, "Where do you think he is?" Wade looked toward the road leading deeper into Silver Pine. "I know." He ended the call. The truck started before Owen reached his own porch. Wade drove through streets he had spent 6 weeks trying not to remember. Past Coulter's Bakery, past the turn toward the library, past the intersection where Laura once dropped a bag of books in the snow and laughed until Ridge tried to pick one up. He did not slow. At the next light, the sky had begun to darken. Small flakes struck the windshield. 4:51. Wade turned onto Birch Street. His heartbeat had become louder than the engine. He saw the wooden bus shelter before he saw anything beneath it. Then the shape resolved. Black back, dark gold legs, one ear angled slightly outward. Ridge sat beneath the shelter facing the bend in the road. Not pacing, not searching. Waiting. Wade slowed the truck. For hours he had been asking where Ridge was trying to go. Now he had his answer. And as the first real snow began to fall over Birch Lane, Wade realized the harder question was what he was going to do when he reached him. Wade stopped the truck half a block from the Birch Lane shelter. For most of the afternoon, every decision had been about reaching Ridge. Find the tracks, follow the sightings, call the right people, get back to Silver Pine. Now the dog was less than 100 yards away, and Wade stayed behind the wheel. Ridge sat beneath the wooden shelter, exactly where he had waited for Laura so many times before. Snow had begun collecting across his black saddle and along the thick fur at his shoulders. His dark gold legs were planted squarely beneath him. His attention remained fixed on the bend where Route 12 would appear. Wade had imagined finding Ridge running through traffic, lost in the woods, exhausted beside a road. He had prepared himself to catch him, restrain him if necessary, get him into the truck, take him home. But Ridge was not lost. That was the first thing Wade understood. The dog had spent hours crossing unfamiliar roads and correcting mistakes, checked the old house, then continued to the one place where Laura had always returned. Ridge knew exactly where he wanted to be. Wade shut off the engine. The ticking of cooling metal filled the cab. For weeks, Wade had treated Ridge's waiting as something to stop. He had locked doors, changed walking routes, moved 7 miles away. He had believed that if he removed enough reminders, Ridge would eventually surrender the habit. The dog had just crossed half a county to prove otherwise. Wade opened the door. Ridge's right ear turned toward the sound. The left followed a fraction later. He knew Wade was there. He did not turn around. Wade walked slowly toward the shelter. His boots made a soft crunch in the new snow. He carried the leash, but did not call Ridge's name. That choice surprised him. Every instinct Wade trusted was built around action. If something mattered, you did something about it. Standing nearby while nothing changed had always felt dangerously close to helplessness. But Ridge had spent weeks telling Wade, in the only language he possessed, that this was not a problem Wade could drag away by a collar. So Wade stepped beneath the shelter and sat on the far end of the bench. Ridge remained near the curb. Between them lay 6 feet of worn wooden slats, and more history than Wade knew how to name. Neither moved. Cars passed. Snow whispered against the roof. Somewhere down the street, a store door opened and shut. Wade looked toward the same bend Ridge watched. For the first time, he did not ask the dog to look somewhere else. That changed the waiting. Not for Ridge, for Wade. He remembered all the afternoons before Laura died, when he had stood behind them, hands in his pockets, mildly amused by a ritual he had never really needed to understand. Laura came home. Ridge greeted her. Wade watched. It had been so dependable that he had mistaken dependable for permanent. Now the bench felt different beneath him. This was where Laura's day used to end. It was where Ridge had expected the world to keep its promise. And Wade had spent weeks trying to make the dog accept an explanation the dog had no language for. A low engine note rose in the distance. Ridge stood immediately. Wade felt his own body react too. Route 12 rounded the bend. For one impossible second, Wade's mind performed the old sequence before reality could stop it. Bus. Door. Laura. The thought vanished almost as soon as it came. Ridge moved closer to the curb. Wade stayed seated. The bus slowed. Iris Nolan was behind the wheel. Her eyes found Ridge first, then Wade. Nothing in her expression asked a question. The folding doors opened. An elderly man in a tan wool coat stepped down carefully, gripping the rail. Ridge leaned forward. A woman followed with 2 paper grocery bags held against her chest. Ridge watched her descend. Then a young mother stepped out holding the hand of a boy in a blue hat. The boy noticed Ridge and smiled. Ridge looked past him, toward the steps. No one else came. The bus remained there. Iris could have closed the doors immediately. She did not. A few seconds passed. There was no Laura. There never would be. Iris looked at Wade through the windshield. Wade gave the smallest nod. She closed the doors. Route 12 pulled away. Ridge followed the red taillights with his eyes until they disappeared beyond the next block. Then the dog remained standing. Wade looked down at the leash in his hand. Weeks earlier, he would already have clipped it on. Not this time. Ridge was not refusing to obey. He was completing the only half of a routine still available to him. Laura had left. Ridge had waited. Laura had returned. Again, and again, and again. Until one day the last part disappeared. Wade remembered the words spoken hundreds of times in every kind of weather. Home before dark. To Laura, they had probably been nothing more than affection shaped into routine. To Ridge, routine was structure. Laura left by this road. Ridge waited here. Dark came after she returned. Wade had spent weeks assuming the dog could somehow replace that structure simply because Wade understood why it was gone. He had expected human knowledge from an animal whose world had been built from scent, repetition, sound, and trust. Wade set the leash beside him. Ridge's ear turned. That small movement pulled Wade back to Cedar Hollow. The dark living room during the power outage, Ridge settling near his boot. Tess asking the question Wade could not answer. What did the two of you do together? Until that night, Wade's answer had been almost nothing. Now he understood something else. Waiting beside Ridge counted. Not because it fixed anything, because Wade had finally stopped requiring the dog to hurt correctly. Ridge moved one step away from the curb, then stopped. Wade rested one hand on the bench between them. "You don't have to wait alone anymore." Ridge turned his head. Wade had imagined saying those words differently during the frantic drive through Silver Pine. He had imagined kneeling beside the dog, maybe putting both hands around his neck, maybe saying something that sounded certain. None of that felt right now. Certainty had caused enough trouble. Ridge watched him. Wade looked back toward the road. "I miss her too." The dog remained still. Wade's voice was lower when he continued. "I don't know what I'm doing." The admission would once have embarrassed him. Here, with snow gathering along the edge of the shelter and Laura absent from every road in front of them, it felt like the first completely accurate thing Wade had said in weeks. He looked at Ridge. "But I'm here." That was all. No promise that everything would improve. No claim that Laura somehow wanted this. No command to forget. Wade had spent enough years learning that promises mattered to know not to make one he could not guarantee. He could guarantee only presence. Ridge looked toward the bend again, then back at Wade. For several seconds the dog did nothing. Wade did not reach for him. He had already learned what happened when he tried to force the next step. A car passed. Ridge's nose lifted briefly. Then the German Shepherd turned away from the curb. He walked toward the bench. Not quickly. Not with the energetic greeting he once gave Laura. He stopped beside Wade's boot, then sat. Their shoulders did not touch. Ridge's body pressed lightly against Wade's knee. Wade lowered his hand to the dog's shoulder, warm fur beneath cold snow. Ridge stayed. Wade closed his eyes. At the hospital, he had been unable to cry. At the old house, he had been unable to enter Laura's bedroom. At Cedar Hollow, he had been unable to admit he wanted Ridge for himself rather than as some living extension of the woman they both loved. Now, none of those defenses helped him. His hand remained on Ridge. Wade bowed his head. The tears came quietly. Not many. Enough. Ridge did not lick his face or perform some perfect act of canine comfort. He simply stayed where he had chosen to sit. That was better. For years, Wade had assumed strength meant being the person others could lean on. Laura had known better. Sometimes strength was letting another living thing remain beside you without pretending you were fine. The snow thickened. 5 minutes passed. Maybe 10. Wade did not check. Then another engine approached. Ridge's ears rose. Wade recognized the sound before the bus turned the corner. Route 12 again, the final run of the evening. Ridge stood. Wade's hand fell from his shoulder. For one brief moment, Wade wondered if nothing had changed at all. The bus pulled in. This time, only 2 passengers got off. A nurse in blue scrubs under a heavy coat. Then, a middle-aged man carrying a toolbox. Ridge watched. The doors remained open. Iris looked at the dog, then at Wade. Wade did not move. Neither did Ridge. That was the difference. Ridge's attention stayed on the bus, but he did not step to the edge of the road. He stood beside the bench. Iris seemed to notice. She waited another heartbeat. Then the doors closed. The bus moved away. Ridge followed it with his eyes. He did not follow with his body. When the taillights disappeared, Wade stood. He picked up the leash, but did not clip it on immediately. "Let's go home." The word came naturally this time. Not Silver Pine. Not the old house. Home. Ridge walked beside him. Halfway to the truck, the dog stopped. Wade stopped too. Ridge turned around. The shelter stood beneath the streetlight, already softening beneath fresh snow. For a second, Wade felt fear rise. He could have attached the leash, could have pulled gently, could have prevented another choice. Instead, he waited. Ridge looked at the shelter, then at the bend, then back at Wade. Wade did nothing. Several long seconds passed. Ridge turned. He walked to Wade. That movement was small enough that anyone driving past would have missed its importance. Wade did not. He clipped the leash on only after Ridge was already beside him. At the truck, Wade opened the rear door. Ridge placed his front paws on the floorboard, then hesitated again. Wade waited. "You've made me look for you across 2 towns today. Take your time." The old dryness in his voice surprised him. Ridge glanced at Wade, then climbed inside. Wade closed the door. He stood beside the truck for a moment, snow settling on his shoulders. Across the road, Birch Lane was empty. Wade looked at it one last time. Not goodbye. He was learning not to demand finality from things that mattered. Then he got behind the wheel. The drive to Cedar Hollow took longer because the snow had begun covering the road. Ridge lay across the back seat. At the first intersection, Wade checked the mirror. The dog was not standing at the window. At the second, Ridge had put his head down. Wade kept his eyes on the road. He did not turn the moment into proof of anything. Tess had warned him indirectly against that kind of thinking. Dogs had good days, bad days, old habits, new habits. The important thing was that Ridge was in the truck, and Wade was no longer driving away from Silver Pine because he needed to escape it. He was simply driving home with his dog. That thought stayed with him all 7 miles. The Cedar Hollow house was dark when they arrived. Wade opened the door. Ridge entered first. He checked the living room, kitchen, and back door as he always did. Then he returned. Wade removed his coat. On the floor near the fireplace lay the old ball, the same one Ridge had abandoned days ago. Wade saw it. Ridge saw it too. Neither touched it. Not tonight. Wade filled Ridge's water bowl and measured out dinner. He placed the bowl in its usual spot. Ridge stood several feet away. For the last few weeks, Wade's pattern had been simple. Put food down, walk away. Leave Ridge to decide when or whether to eat. Wade straightened. Tess's question returned. "What did the 2 of you do together?" Wade looked toward the small kitchen table. He pulled out a chair, carried it closer to Ridge's bowl, sat. Ridge watched him. "This is apparently our exciting new hobby." The dog's left ear tilted slightly outward. Wade rested his forearms on his knees. "No speeches. Doctor's orders." Ridge approached the bowl. He sniffed, looked at Wade, then ate. Wade stayed. The house was still quiet. Laura was still gone. The boxes were still half unpacked. Nothing outside that room had changed enough to justify the word healed. But for the first time since Wade brought Ridge to Cedar Hollow, they were not performing separate routines in the same house. One ate. One sat nearby. Both remained. Wade looked at the dog Laura had once chosen without hesitation. For years, he had called Ridge her dog. Maybe that had been true. Maybe it still was in a way that did not need to end. But as Ridge finished eating and settled down beside Wade's chair instead of beside the front door, Wade understood that another truth had finally begun beside it. Ridge was not all Wade had left of Laura. Ridge was someone Wade still had. And tonight, neither of them was waiting alone. The morning after Birch Lane, Wade woke before sunrise and reached for the second coffee mug. His hand stopped halfway to the cabinet. For a few seconds, he stood in the Cedar Hollow kitchen with one mug in his left hand, and the memory of another morning filling the space beside him. Laura would have been coming down the hall by then. She would have complained that he made the coffee too strong. Ridge would have been waiting near the door. The thought arrived with enough force that Wade nearly put the mug back and left the kitchen. Instead, he set one mug on the counter. One. Then made coffee. Ridge entered a minute later. The German Shepherd looked toward the front door. Wade noticed. He did not pretend not to. "Morning." Ridge looked at him. Wade drank. Nothing dramatic happened. That became important. The trip to Birch Lane had not fixed Ridge. It had not fixed Wade either. 2 evenings later, at 4:46, Ridge walked to the door and stood there. Wade looked at the clock. Then at the dog. His first instinct was to distract him. Ball. Food. Walk somewhere else. Instead, Wade put on his boots. They went outside. But this time, he did not drive to Silver Pine. He walked Ridge along the Cedar Hollow Road, down toward the frozen lake, and back through the pines. Ridge turned his head toward the southern road twice. Wade noticed both times. He kept walking. After several minutes, Ridge followed. The next morning, they did it again. Then again. Not at 5. In the morning. That mattered too. The new walk did not replace Birch Lane. Wade did not want it to. It belonged to a different hour, a different road, and eventually to the two of them. At first, they covered less than a mile. Wade walked with his hands in his coat pockets, while Ridge investigated snowbanks, tree trunks, and places where rabbits had crossed during the night. The dog moved more slowly than Wade remembered from before Laura died. But he moved. After a week, Ridge began waiting near the back door shortly after Wade finished his first cup of coffee. Not every morning. Enough mornings for Wade to notice. One Saturday, Wade stayed at the table longer than usual. Ridge walked to the door, looked back. Wade ignored him. Ridge came closer. Wade raised an eyebrow. "You've got a clock problem?" Ridge walked back toward the door. Wade finished his coffee. "Fine." The word sounded familiar. For years, Wade had said it when Ridge came to the garage to bring him inside for dinner. He remembered that only after they reached the lake. The memory did not stop him this time. It simply walked beside him. That was new. Over the next several weeks, Wade discovered that healing rarely announced itself when it happened. It hid inside small inconveniences. Mud on the kitchen floor because Ridge had been running outside. A leash left over the wrong chair. A dog bowl that needed refilling because Ridge had actually eaten dinner. One morning, Wade found the old ball under the table. He assumed he had kicked it there. Then, Ridge walked over, picked it up, and dropped it at Wade's feet. Wade looked down. Ridge waited. No. The dog nudged the ball forward with his nose. Wade stared at him. "You ignored that thing for a month." Ridge pushed it against Wade's boot. Wade bent, picked it up, and opened the back door. The yard was still patched with old snow, but the center had softened enough for grass to show through. Wade threw the ball. Not far. Ridge ran. The first throw came back slowly, the second faster. By the fourth, Ridge was moving with something Wade had not seen since Silver Pine, a loose, almost careless energy. Wade threw again. Ridge overshot the ball, skidded, turned, and came back with snow on his muzzle. A laugh escaped Wade before he could stop it. He went completely still. Ridge stopped too. For half a second, Wade felt guilty. The reaction was so immediate it angered him, as if laughter belonged to the version of his life where Laura was alive, as if happiness required permission from the dead. Ridge dropped the ball. Wade looked at him, then down at the snow. Laura would have hated that thought, not because she had ever lectured him about grief, because she had spent 17 years refusing to let him turn ordinary life into a rule book. Wade picked up the ball. "You missed it." Ridge's ears lifted. Wade threw again. That evening he talked about Laura for the first time without someone else bringing her up. He was standing at the kitchen counter, looking at a stack of tools he had left beside the sink. Ridge lay nearby. Wade looked at the mess. "Laura would have made me move all this." Ridge raised his head at the sound of her name. Wade did not stop. "She said the kitchen wasn't a workshop." He looked at the screwdriver in his hand. "She was wrong about that." The corner of his mouth moved. Ridge lowered his head again. Nothing in the room changed. No shadow passed. No sudden sadness forced Wade to sit down. Laura's name simply remained in the air with everything else. After that, Wade used it more. Not constantly, not as a ritual. When the coffee tasted terrible, he remembered Laura refusing to drink a new brand he had once bought in bulk. When Ridge tracked mud through the hall, Wade remembered Laura saying every clean floor was only temporary if you loved a dog. The memories no longer arrived only as evidence of what had been taken away. Some began returning as themselves. That spring, Wade finally opened the last box marked Laura. He had moved it from Silver Pine to Cedar Hollow, and then shifted it twice without unpacking it. The box contained no mystery. That almost made it harder. Sweaters, a pair of gloves, 3 books, an old receipt, a small pouch of jewelry, and the cream scarf Laura had worn on the bus the last morning. Wade stopped. Ridge was lying near the window. The dog lifted his head when Wade unfolded the scarf. Wade held it without bringing it to his face. He did not need to chase a scent that might or might not still be there. Ridge came over on his own. The German shepherd sniffed the wool. Once, then again. His ears shifted. Wade watched. Ridge did not whine, did not paw at the scarf. After a few seconds, he sat beside Wade. For months, Wade had feared moments like this because he thought memory was a door that only opened backward. Now he understood it could also be furniture, something you made room for, something that stayed without blocking the hallway. Wade carried the scarf into the living room. Laura's old reading chair stood near the window. He draped the cream wool across the back, then stepped away. The chair did not become a shrine. It became a chair again. That afternoon, Ridge slept beside it for an hour. At 4:47, he did not go to the front door. Wade noticed. He said nothing. Spring reached Cedar Hollow slowly. Snow retreated from the shaded edges of the lake. The road softened. Birds returned to the pines. With better weather, Wade began taking Ridge farther. They walked the lake trail, then the old county path. Sometimes Ridge moved ahead. Sometimes he stayed beside Wade. Once he stopped at an intersection where the southern road led toward Silver Pine. Wade watched him. Ridge sniffed the air, then turned toward the lake trail. Wade followed. That small choice stayed with him for the rest of the day. By April, Wade had stopped avoiding Silver Pine. He did not move back. That would have been another attempt to make one place solve everything. Instead, he began going when he had a reason. The first reason was Marion. She called on a Wednesday. I have a shelf that Laura complained about for approximately 4 years. Wade stood in the Cedar Hollow garage with a socket wrench in one hand. You have maintenance people? They have demonstrated a philosophical disagreement with level surfaces. Wade smiled despite himself. What do you want? Bring tools. After closing time, Wade drove to the Silver Pine Community Library. Ridge came with him. The dog paused when they reached the parking lot. Wade noticed, but did not guide him toward the old bus route. Instead, they walked to the library's covered reading porch, where Marion had arranged for Ridge to stay, while she and Wade worked inside with the side door open. Marion was wearing a rust-colored cardigan and had a pencil tucked behind one ear. The crooked shelf stood along the back wall. Wade stared at it. It's barely off. Marion folded her arms. Laura said that too, until she watched a marble roll from one end to the other. She brought a marble? She was committed to evidence. That sounded exactly like her. Wade removed his coat. For the next 40 minutes, they worked without talking about grief. Marion handed him tools badly. Wade complained. Marion ignored him. It was the most normal conversation they had shared since Laura died. When the shelf was level, Marion disappeared into the staff room. She returned carrying 2 cups of coffee, then stopped. Her eyes moved to the second cup. For one quiet second, neither of them spoke. The old habit was obvious. Marion had spent 13 years bringing coffee to herself and Laura. She looked embarrassed. Wade took 1 cup. Marion picked up the other. Then she walked back toward the staff room. Wade spoke before she reached the door. "You can keep it." Marion turned. "I don't need to." "Laura would've." Marion looked at the extra cup. A small smile appeared. "She absolutely would have." They stood there for a few seconds, not sad enough to leave, and not cheerful enough to pretend. Then Marion set the second coffee beside the repaired shelf. Not as an offering, just because there was nowhere else to put it yet. Outside, Ridge rose when Wade stepped onto the porch. He came over. Wade scratched the fur along his neck. "Ready?" Ridge walked with him to the truck. He did not pull toward Birch Lane. A month later, Wade drove there anyway. That distinction mattered. It was his decision. Ridge sat in the passenger side back seat as the truck moved through Silver Pine. Wade parked near the familiar wooden shelter. Neither rushed. They walked the last half block. Ridge recognized the place immediately. His pace changed. Not faster. More focused. At the shelter, he stood where he once had. Wade sat. They waited. Not for hours. Not until dark. Just long enough for the place to be what it was. Route 12 appeared around the bend. Ridge's ears rose. The bus stopped. The doors opened. Iris was driving. She looked older to Wade than she had a few months before, though perhaps everyone did after enough time had passed. 2 passengers got off. Ridge watched. Iris leaned toward the open doorway. "Well," Wade looked up. "I thought you'd retired." "I tried. They asked me to come back 3 days a week because apparently no one else knows how to make the heater work." Wade glanced at the bus. "Critical infrastructure." Iris nodded solemnly. Then she looked at Ridge. "Did he finally stop waiting?" Wade followed her gaze. Ridge was looking toward the bend in the road. For several seconds, he remained still. Then he turned his head toward Wade. Wade felt the answer before he found the words. "No." Iris waited. Wade rested one hand on his knee. "I think he just learned that remembering someone doesn't mean you have to stand still forever." The sentence surprised him, not because it was profound, because he realized it was also true for him. Iris seemed to understand. She nodded once. No lecture, no blessing, just acknowledgement. Wade stood. "Come on, Ridge." The dog looked once toward the road, then walked with Wade. They did not wait for the final bus. After that, time began moving in larger pieces. Spring became summer. The lake opened fully and reflected long evenings of light. Ridge slept on the porch, while Wade repaired a section of railing. By July, the dog had developed a habit of carrying the ball outside every morning and abandoning it in a different place. Wade claimed this was poor discipline. Ridge showed no interest in improving. In August, Wade finally opened the bedroom door he had avoided since leaving Silver Pine. The room in Cedar Hollow had never belonged to Laura, but the unopened boxes inside had. He unpacked them. Not all at once, a few things at a time. By autumn, one framed photograph of Laura stood on the shelf in the living room. Not every photograph. One. Laura was laughing in it. Ridge sat beside her. Wade was partly visible at the edge, annoyed because she had taken the picture before he was ready. For once, he left himself in the frame. Marion occasionally called. Iris waved when Route 12 passed Wade's truck in town. Dr. Tess Marlowe saw Ridge for a routine follow-up and commented only that his weight looked good. Wade appreciated that she did not turn improvement into a ceremony. Life did not return. It accumulated. Then winter came again. Not the hard middle of February, the first quiet snow of the season. Nearly a year had passed since the morning Ridge stood between Laura and a bus door. Wade and Ridge walked along the Cedar Hollow Lake Trail just after sunrise. The world had softened beneath a thin layer of white. Ridge moved several steps ahead. He was stronger now, not younger, not transformed, simply himself again, in ways Wade had almost forgotten. At a bend in the trail, Ridge stopped. Wade kept walking. The dog turned, amber eyes fixed on him. For a moment, Wade saw another image layered over the one in front of him. Ridge standing at the Silver Pine front door, looking at the handle, looking at Wade. Come on, it's time to go get her. But there was no bus now, no promised arrival at the end of the road. Ridge was simply waiting for Wade to catch up. Wade walked toward him. The dog remained still until Wade reached his side. Then Ridge turned forward. They continued together. Wade looked at the German shepherd beside him and remembered the spring afternoon 3 years earlier when he had brought Ridge home for Laura. Back then, Wade thought he had given his wife a dog. After Laura died, he thought Ridge was what she had left him. Both ideas were incomplete. Ridge was not a gift that could belong to one person forever. He was not a keepsake. He had lost Laura too. Somewhere inside that loss, Wade and Ridge had discovered something neither relationship had contained before. Not replacement, not rescue, companionship. The kind built slowly. Morning walks, bad coffee, a ball in the snow, a chair beside a food bowl, a man learning that silence could be shared instead of endured. Wade had spent much of his life believing love was proven by what a person could protect. Laura had taught him something different. Ridge had finished the lesson. Sometimes love survived because someone stayed. Sometimes it survived because someone finally moved. Loyalty did not always mean standing forever in the place where another life had disappeared. Sometimes the most faithful thing a person could do was carry that love forward, without pretending the road behind them had never existed. Ridge moved slightly ahead, then slowed until Wade was beside him again. Behind them, 2 sets of tracks ran through the fresh snow. Neither turned back. Not because Laura had been forgotten. She had not. She remained in a cream scarf over a chair, in a crooked library shelf, in a sentence Iris remembered, in Wade's habit of making coffee too strong, in a dog who still lifted his head when someone said her name. But memory no longer demanded that Wade or Ridge stop where she had left them. They kept walking, and the promise Wade had made at Birch Lane was no longer only something he had said to a grieving dog. It had become the life they were quietly building together. Neither of them had to wait alone anymore. Sometimes healing does not mean letting go of the one we lost. It means learning how to carry that love without letting grief keep us standing in the same place forever. Wade and Ridge never forgot Laura. They simply learned that love could still walk beside them, even after she was gone. If you are carrying the memory of someone you miss, I hope this story reminds you that moving forward is not the same as leaving them behind. May you find peace in the memories that remain, and someone, or something, willing to walk the next part of the road with you. If this story meant something to you, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you would like to hear more stories of loyalty, healing, and second chances, please subscribe to the channel.